Between 1994 and roughly 2004, when production finally slowed right down, literally thousands of PS1 games were released, and only about 2,000 of them were Phoenix games. As we covered in our PS1 Hidden Gems video, not all of those games got their chance in the sun. While we pretty much all hope the prices in the retro gaming market come down to more reasonable numbers sometime soon, the PS1 plays host to a whole load of rare games that either haven't been ported, fell into cultural oblivion, or call to mind 9/11. Thinking of venturing into your attic to check out your old PlayStation collection? Any of these could help you buy a PS5, or like a really cool dog. Comment really cool dog down below and you could win a free Steam key. Right, now let's bask in a truly broken economy and look at some of the rarest PS1 games ever released. Number 10, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Look, I love JoJo. It makes about as much logical sense as trying to milk a seagull, but this beautifully dumb series has me in a headlock, and so does this forgotten adaptation. Developed and published by Capcom, who published a staggering 60 plus games during the PlayStation 1's lifespan, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a straightforward 2D brawler that nevertheless features some of the most unusual characters the company ever committed to a fighting game, including a dog with a person's face. Iggy's a good boy, man, dog really, don't let the face tell you otherwise. An adaptation of the franchise's arguably most popular arc, Stardust Crusaders, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure was originally released to arcades but also got a commendable PS1 port alongside a much better Dreamcast version that isn't much less cheaper, that unfortunately got a little lost in the shuffle of the seemingly bottomless well of great PlayStation games that came out in 1999 alone. That and the IP just generally being for freakazoids might go a long way towards explaining why the game is a holy grail for many PS1 or even Capcom collectors. It's literally my holy grail. Here's a gap in my collection where it should be, but sadly my budget is tied up in cool dogs funds right now. Number 9, Shadow Tower. Is a quick explanation of how the economy works. From software multiplied by time equals money. Shadow Tower is the sort of first-person dungeon crawler that they just don't seem to make anymore, especially in the mainstream. While not a particularly remarkable example of the genre, it's a decent bit of fun for those who love nothing more than endless grimy walls, hellish monster fighting, and careful management of your ever-diminishing resources, so it's basically like a weekend out in Blackpool. Shadow Tower failed to make a big impression, with critics like PSX Nation writing in 1999 that the game will likely be forgotten, and deservedly so. Meow, game reviewers back in the day were almost entirely powered by pot noodles and spite, we're pretty sure. This reception was unfortunate considering the developers from Software had done relatively well with the similar King's Field games, which were cult hits. Given the game's lukewarm reception, and the fact that clearly there weren't a lot of copies printed, it's easy to see why Shadow Tower is almost impossible to bring out of the shadows these days, though your fave video essayists are doing their very best. Number 8, Tail Concerto. The utterly adorable Tail Concerto was a sure thing for furry friends who also liked giant mechs, with a 3D platforming game that bursts with personality, colour and charm. The first game in the Little Tail Bronx series, Tail Concerto was a good fit for those seeking lighter or even family-friendly fare in an era of games increasingly being rated for older teenagers or adults. Tail Concerto features anime cutscenes, a likeable cast of characters, and really deserved to do a lot better than it did upon release in the late 90s. Lads, just listen to this. Unfortunately, Tail Concerto might have just seemed a little too cutesy for all the expected thrill killers out there. It's difficult to get your hands on a copy for less than the cost of an actual PS5, as the game was yet another PlayStation 1 release that came and went in the veritable ocean of releases the console was seeing at the time, and it hasn't been seen at all since. My voice trembled then when I said all. Oh. Number 7, Persona 2 Eternal Punishment. If you ask us, the real eternal punishment is gazing at your overdraft after buying this game. Persona 2 Eternal Punishment received rave reviews upon its release in the year 2000, and it's only briefly seen a release on PSP in the years since. A direct sequel to Persona 2 Innocent Sin, who did nothing wrong. Everyone does a bit of genocide sometimes, don't worry about it. The game offered players a fascinating opportunity to experience a familiar story and characters from a wholly different perspective. At the same time, Eternal Punishment returned you to the task of navigating viciously complex dungeons, fighting demons, and potentially recruiting some of them to your cause through the game's ingenious demon conversation system. Persona 2 was an excellent continuation of a franchise we all know and love today, but at this point in time the series was still something of just a cult favourite. There just weren't many copies in circulation, and today it's a difficult find in the collector's market as it is, especially after Persona 4 took the series into the stratosphere. Number 6, The Misadventures of Tron Bonne. Somewhere in the multiverse is the timeline where the entire Mega Man Legends franchise spawned more than just the 3 wonderful games we got. It's probably the same timeline where we also got Titanfall 3. The Misadventures of Tron Bonne was released in 1999 as a spin-off of the Legends series, offering effectively the same sort of action platformer experience as those games. Players controlled the cheerful young criminal Tron Bonne in her bid to plunder enough loot to save her siblings and clear her family's debt for good. You should expect a game loaded with cute visuals, varied if much too short gameplay, and a sense of humour that you can't help but fall in love with. Unfortunately, the game doesn't seem to have sold especially well at all. While we're here, look at the price that the game used to go for at the bottom. Wow. If you absolutely insist on playing the Misadventures of Tron Bonne with original software, you're in for a challenge for your accountant, as this now sells for well over $400. Tron Bonne? More like money gone. Number 5, Rayman 2 The Great Escape Watch Bundle. Damn it, Rayman, why do you insist on hurting us like this? All we want to do is get our aging hands on the Watch Bundle edition of your very good PS1 sequel, Rayman 2 The Great Escape, to truly feel happiness and never sadness ever again, right? Just keep consuming, right? That's all we need to do, right? This excellent 2000 sequel got released to a bunch of different consoles, and the PlayStation 1 version is basically as fun as any of them, even if it's often forgotten about. This is a game you can get for far less than it originally cost on almost any console of the era if you aren't particularly picky about which physical version of this game you want. However, if you want the Watch Bundle edition of Rayman 2 The Great Escape, you're going to be waiting for a copy just to even show up, let alone one that's completely new and unopened in the box. If you do come across one with a rather fetching watch inside, act fast or you'll be as depressed as anyone who tries to 100% these games without going completely insane. We think that Ubisoft should look at their own watches and realise that it's way past time to make a new Rayman game. Want to see us do a video on the elbowless wonder? Let us know down below. Number 4, Starblade Alpha Longbox.
Wing alert, penetrate the giant battleship, over.
Released in 1991 for arcades, Starblade Alpha was a solid commercial and critical success for Namco, who really used to release some of the most bonkers games that you just don't see anymore. Not surprisingly, it received a number of ports, including the Sega CD and PS1, and as recently as the PS3 and PS Vita in 2014. Reviews of these ports vary, but are generally positive, with the PS1 edition of the game faring just a little bit better than the Sega CD release. But how is the game itself? But if you want the PS1 Longbox edition of Starblade Alpha, you're going to be shelling out way over 500 bones for a copy. And that's just because the box is long, a phenomenon that we never got to enjoy here in Europe. If you enjoyed Long Dennis and want more long things, don't wait too long before you snag this one up. Long Song by Cisco. I can't believe Long Dennis has his own wiki page, and one that's genuinely more in-depth than the Wikipedia pages for several prominent economies. Where's my book for vulture lore? Did you know that eating cabbage makes me slightly prejudiced? Only very, very slightly though, so it's alright. Number 3, Mortal Kombat 3 Jewel Case. Even though it's slightly a black sheep in the early era of the series, Mortal Kombat 3 would be the last time the franchise would utilise mocap digitized graphics for its characters, and so for some, MK3 represents the end of an era. While the game received plenty of praise and commercial success, it was also criticised for omitting characters like Scorpion, among other issues. These problems were later addressed with Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, but the OG is today generally seen as a pretty good but not incredible entry into the series. Whether you play Ultimate or the original version, getting your hands on a physical copy of Mortal Kombat 3 isn't difficult or prohibitively expensive. The problem comes down to finding a PS1 copy of the game in good condition in a jewel case. Fascinatingly, even though Longbox PS1 games can be stupid expensive, Mortal Kombat 3 is rare because of the low print jewel case versions that came out after the Longboxes. Even a loose copy of this version goes for hundreds of dollars these days. What? With a brand new CIB edition selling for 2,500 bones or more. Ask yourself, $2,500 on an old Mortal Kombat, or like 3 or 4 skins in Mortal Kombat 1? Tough choice. I'm gonna go with the jewel case, to be honest. Number 2, Syphon Filter 3 9/11 edition. Everyone can relax, because the 9/11 edition of Syphon Filter 3 for the original PlayStation isn't nearly as spicy as it sounds. It's not even called that officially. The industry isn't that tactless all the time. This controversy is instead pretty straightforward. Originally slated for release on September 25th, 2001, the game made its way to a few retailers but was pulled almost immediately after the events of September 11th. This was merely a case of Sony playing it safe by removing potentially offensive items, including an American flag, references to terrorism, and anything else that could be linked to the tragedy and its nightmarish aftermath. As for the game itself, it's a more than satisfying continuation of a beloved series that Sony unfortunately asked to look at the flowers long ago. You can even play this third entry in the franchise on PS5 if you fancy a bit of upscaled stealthing. But if you want this extremely rare physical edition, you're going to be searching for a long old while, as they don't sell all that often at all and are pretty dang rare. But it's not even the rarest PS1 game, which is number 1, NFL Blitz 2000 Greatest Hits. No, we're not messing with you. NFL Blitz 2000 is the rarest PS1 game in at least the West, for the simple fact that very few copies under the PS1's Greatest Hits banner, which is the ugly cousin to Europe's Giga Chad Platinum range, were ever released. You can find the game for Dreamcast and 64 and in its original PS1 release form without too much issue. This arcade-style football game in itself is not rare at all, as annual sports games tend to multiplay like gremlins. But if you find the game with the Greatest Hits packaging for less than $1,000, you've hit the jackpot. Yep, that's right, a hideous green strip that not even Shrek could love for 2,500 bones.
I'm broke! I'm a dead man!
For true PS1 completionists, this is the holy grail of hard to find PS1 games. No other PS1 variant even comes that close, and keep in mind there's nothing different in the actual game about this version over the initial PS1 release. It just so happens to have exceedingly rare, exceedingly gaudy packaging. This version is so rare that only one has ever sold, and there are currently 0 listed on eBay. As for the game itself, it's no Madden 08, but it's about as good as Dragon's Dogma 2, apparently. And these were the rarest PS1 games that have ever been released. Do you own any of them? Have you checked your attic lately? Be sure to let us know down in the comments down below. I've been Jimmy for Cultured Vultures, and thank you for watching.